but obviously it's connected to this week's parasha, Parashat Vayechi. And the pasuk starts Vayechi Yaakov be'eretz Mitzrayim sheva esrei shana, starting with the life. Vayechi Yaakov be'eretz Mitzrayim. But as we mentioned yesterday, this week's parasha, it's called Parashat Stuma. What does that mean, Parashat Stuma? There is no separation between last week's parasha and this week's parasha, right? It's all continuation of the same thing. And the pasuk says, and the reason why it's Parashat Stuma, so Chazal is saying, is because Nistemu Einehem veLibam shel Israel. The eyes and the heart of Am Yisrael were blocked in this week's parasha because of the galut, because of the exile that actually started. Now, Rabotai, Yaakov Avinu just arrived to Mitzrayim now. It's not going to be 1 or 2 years. It's going to be 17 years. How come that the parasha says this parasha is Setuma? Because at this particular moment, right, the eyes and the heart of Am Yisrael, they got blocked out of the suffering of the exile. Which suffering of exile? By the way, do you know what Chazal is saying? Chazal is saying that until the last one of the sons of Yaakov Avinu passed away, until the last one, the galut didn't even start. Which means that it's going to take a couple of good years later until the galut, the suffering of the galut will start. So why this week's parasha, it's Parashat Stuma? So I'm going to tell you something unbelievable. We all know that Am Yisrael got to Mitzrayim, that the brothers of Yosef rather, they got to Mitzrayim, and Yosef decides to send them where? To Goshen. What was in Goshen? So Goshen was the Jewish court, out there, the ghetto, okay, not to get mixed up with the Goyim. Now Yosef, I believe, he gave them exactly an amount of land needed for whatever amount of people there were. Which means, even if you want to tell me that he gave them extra piece of land, not to be too tight, but okay. Rabotai, very quick, Am Yisrael grew up and they started to have kids and grandkids, right? All in Mitzrayim. Now it was a little bit tight. It was tight. But nobody complained. You want to know why nobody complained? Because Yaakov Avinu was alive. As far as Yaakov Avinu is alive, everybody was surrounding Yaakov Avinu. He was the role model of Am Yisrael, the role model of his grandsons, grandchildren. Whoever was still alive until Yaakov Avinu passed away. But guess what? At the moment that Yaakov Avinu passed away, at that particular moment, Am Yisrael, they started to complain. Listen, it's too tight over here. We got to know a little bit more what's going on out there. We got to, be more in the eyes of the Mitzrim. To get more into the, not for us. It's not that we need it, but Shalom Malchut, etc. All type of reasons. And unfortunately, Am Yisrael, they started to get slowly closer and closer to the Mitzrim. The difference, when the galut started, was already the worst moment. Am Yisrael was doing Avodah Zarah. Am Yisrael was already part of the culture of Mitzrayim. But how did they get to that level? How? At the moment that they decided to leave the area where Am Yisrael were at the beginning and to get open. That's why this week's parasha is Satum. This week's parasha is the life of Yaakov Avinu, but it's the death of Yaakov Avinu as well. Yaakov Avinu is passing away in this week's parasha. And at the moment that he passes away, that's the moment that Am Israel, unfortunately, they start slowly opening up with themselves and getting mangled with a goyim. What's the point behind this? So obviously the point is, Yaakov Avinu gives a beracha to his sons, to his grandsons. נכון? And then he says uh, a second beracha that is Amalach goel oti mikol ra. Right? What's Amalach goel oti mikol ra? The malach that saved me, says Yaakov Avinu, mikol ra, yevarech et hane'arim, right? He will bless these young boys, Ephraim and Menachem, יברך את הנערים, וידגו לרוב בקרב הארץ. And it should be ידגו לרוב. What's ידגו? Huh? Fish. They should be, growing up like the fish בקרב הארץ. Now usually the fish are not בקרב הארץ, they're in the water. So what's the meaning of וידגו לרוב בקרב הארץ? Why Yaakov Avinu decides to give that blessing to Am Yisrael by being like the fish בקרב הארץ? My dear friends, Yaakov Avinu knew that when he will pass away, Am Yisrael will get opened. Says Yaakov Avinu, but if you're not connected to the source, if you're not trying to be all the time like the fish, they don't leave the water. Doesn't matter what's going to happen, they will never leave the water. If you're not going to feel connected all the time to the water, you will be dead. Says Yaakov Avinu, I want to give you the only way to survive in this coming up exile. What is it? Be connected. Be like the fish. Famous mashal that the I believe it's the Mesilat Sharim bringing down, or the Orchot Tzadikim, I don't remember, that it says, the famous mashal that Chazal is saying about the fox that was passing by the river, and he sees the fish, and he says to the fish, guys, I see guys people are trying to fish you, they're throwing nets. Come with me, I'll save you. I'll protect you. So they told him, Tipesh, you're Chacham, you Tipesh. By having the net in the water, Safek if we're going to be alive, or Safek we're going to be dead. But going with you, it's for sure death. Says Yaakov Avinu, the only way to live in exile, it's when you're connected to Torah. Ken ma'im ela Torah. If you're not connected, if there is no Torah in the place where you live, you should know there is no future for your kids and grandkids. It will be lost, bar minan. You want to protect your kids, you want to protect your family, you must be in an area of Torah. I was speaking many years ago, I was in Israel, in an organization called Ner LeElef. Ner LeElef, I was as a student over there. Ner LeElef is an organization that besides the Kolalim of the Avrechim that they're learning for Rabbanut, they go twice a week to their center, and they give them all type of tools to be in community, right? And with all type of problems that could be in the community, etc. And they give you the tools. And I remember there was somebody that told us, you should know one thing. If you want to make a change in a community, if you want the community to go from one extreme to another, to grow tremendously, there is only one way. Open up a center of Torah. If there is a place of Torah, he said a kollel, but even if it's not possible, a kollel, center of Torah. Why? Because the only solution against what's going on today around the world, it's only when you have that Torah, when you know exactly what is the Torah asking from us. I'll tell you this, and I shared it in the past many times with you, but I'll repeat it. There was a couple that came from Mexico to Miami. They got here. And in Mexico, as you know, the community, it's a very strong community, the Jewish community. They have schools, they have yeshivot, kodalim. Yeah? Even the not very frum schools, They're very connected. Very connected. So this couple, they moved to Miami. And what can I tell you? They didn't know what to do with their kids. They used to send their kids to a certain school in Mexico. I mean, religious in a very basic level, but boys and girls together, not really tzniut, but at the end of the day, under under the frame of the community. They got here and they were looking different schools. Now, Rabotai, this is something that when I heard it, I was in shock. They got here and they were looking the regular Jewish schools over here that we have. They were doubting what to do. They called up one of the rabbis in Mexico. The rabbi told him, listen, Habibi, I want you to do me a favor. Go to those schools that you want to put your kids on. Don't speak to the elementary principal. Go and speak with the high school principal. Okay? And I want you to ask him 2 questions. That's it. After you get the answer, you tell me what's your conclusion. First question, how do you guys deal with drugs? Second question, how do you guys deal if there is a boy or a girl that are claiming that they have temptations on the same gender? Now his kids, he says, but my kids are going to first grade, second grade. So yeah, I know. But you want to put them in those schools. Eventually they're going to grow up, they'll be in the high school. So I want you to speak with the high school principal. The guy comes over to me and he says, Rabbi, I only ask one question. I only ask one question about the gender. Now when I ask the question, the principal says to me, so far we don't have cases. But I just want to tell you that, of course, if there is such a case, we have the obligation to support the kid and to explain to the family that they have to accept him, and we have to, to understand him and his feelings. Therefore, he has to. So we're going to be here for the kid. The father came over to me and he says, I went out. I called up my rabbi in Mexico. Crazy. I told him, how come? And it says to me, you should know that in America, religious school, it's not for religious people. Religious school, it's not for religious people. Religious school is for everybody. Why? Because it's the only way to have the clarity of what the Torah education it is, and what's real values that you want to that you want to teach your kids. He ended up putting his kids to a Talmud Torah. But dear friends, we have to know, in Galut, when we are in exile, especially when we're not in Goshen, when we're not in one small closed community, but we're actually in an open place, you have to know the only solution is when you're connected to your water, connected to Torah education. Whenever you have Torah education, you're sure that you're going to be protected against what's going around us. So Yeh Ratzon, the Borei Olam will help us out to be always connected and to be Zocheh Be'ezrat Hashem to the final Geulah. Amen. כן יהי רצון. רבי חנניה בן הקדושה אומר, רצה הקדוש ברוך הוא לזכות את ישראל לפיכך. ונבע להם תורה מסות שנאמר אדוני חפץ למען צדקו.